Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we're going to be talking about the ubiquitous idea of shit tests. This is something that guys talk about in all guy sections of the internet. I can explain what it is and why I don't believe that it's real, or at least it can be real, but it's certainly not like this major thing that women do or anything like it. Please do subscribe. Before I get to the topic for today, I will tell you to subscribe. I have a lot of good ones on female arousal, female sexual dysfunction, and then most recently about couples you meet in counseling. Number 3, the divorced in spirit, aka just a loveless marriage. And I talk about that in depth and who gets involved in those and what to do. All right, so this idea of shit testing is big in the manosphere. It's like this idea that women are trying to test your, quote, frame, meaning like whether you're going to fold like a little whiny baby in the face of any sort of test, or whether you are going to remain strong and firm in your masculinity. Women don't do this. Women don't do this. So the way that this sounds, I felt it was a good analogy I thought of in my Facebook group where this discussion came up was, you know how you feel as a man, like a man listening to this, when women talk about the man cold, you know, and like how apparently like men lay in bed the minute that they get a cold and like call out of work. I mean, like just the crazy shit that I've like never seen. Or like, so then when people are talking all on the internet, like women, they're like so convinced it's like a man cold and women keep on ticking and men just like give up and go into bed. Have you seen that? Because, like, I've not seen that. I've been married twice. Like, nobody takes a fucking day off work unless they're about to literally die. You know, like, if you're a responsible guy, of course you're still doing shit. I mean, like, it goes without saying, you know, to men. But then so many women think it's the opposite. So the reality is that the women that are partnered with unusually lazy men, right? So like 10% of women, they're very loud about this. And then other women, it goes along, sounds good. It's a way to feel good about yourself and your gender. So they're like, yeah, man cold. Meanwhile, like women are like, by the way, obviously to me, the physically weaker gender. We're smaller, you know, like, I mean, women they have migraines more, they have depression more, they have anxiety more, they have chronic pain more. Out of all the people that I've talked to over all these years, women have chronic pain so much more. They're in bed much more. Reality, me too, you know, me too. I get migraines too, you know, and depression. So anyway, so the way that a man would feel hearing about this man cold, be like, the hell are you talking about? I've been in the military, like, you know, or like whatever the case may be. Like, what are they even talking about with this? That is how the average woman feels hearing about shit tests. Exactly how. So similarly, there may be 5 to 10% of women, everybody with borderline personality, which is about 5% prevalence rate. You can go back to my narcissist borderline podcast. So women with borderline personality disorder totally test. They don't just test you. They test their therapists. They test their doctors. They test their friends. They test in ways like, well, like maybe I'm going to kill myself if you don't do this. These are people who've experienced tremendous trauma. In fact, borderline personality disorder is getting a makeover lately. Well deserved as complex PTSD, and it is. You know, you don't come out borderline if you had a childhood that was anything less than traumatic or neglectful. You just don't. And similar, I think what's waiting in the wings, I hope, is a transformation and a makeover for narcissistic personality disorder, which also comes from trauma and parenting that can be overly validating to the point that it's crazy making, or also neglectful / abusive. So it's not like one personality disorder, by the way. This is like treatable now. Nobody used to think borderline was treatable. And now they don't think narcissism is treatable. They're both treatable. They're people. People are treatable. Anyway, that's beside the point. But anyway, so yes, there are women who do this. And yes, men have encountered who are the women that are going out and dating loads and loads and loads of guys because they can't stand to be alone? people with borderline do. So they may be a small percent of the population, but they are a larger percent of who men have dated. So if men have dated a lot of women, statistically, they're going to get one with borderline personality in there. That's definite that they do testing. Also, women with narcissistic personality do testing. But then you may be like, what about men? Do men with narcissistic personality disorder, which is in higher rates than women? Narcissism is higher in men and borderline higher in women. Do those men test women? Yes, of course. Oh my God. How many times have I been in session and they're right there, and the man who struggles with narcissistic traits and or if not a complete diagnosis is like, no, she loves my body. She loves my body. She just can't get enough of my body. And she's really into me working out. And the woman's like, oh yeah, I'm really into him working out. Then I get her individually and she's like, yeah, he really needs me to say things like that. He really needs a lot of validation. So like if I don't say things like that, he kind of like keeps looking at me until I do. So I do, exact equivalent of basically a shit test. There is something that you're supposed to say, and if you don't say it, the person will become whiny, sulky, and difficult. So it happens as much with men as it happens with women in the personality disorder realm. Now, in the 95% of people who are not, the 90% of people, because I guess listen, I just did a TikTok on this, but the prevalence of actual NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, is very low in the community, but it's high within mental health. So it's like 2 to 16% of people that come in for mental health counseling, but only 0.5% in the natural population. So borderline is like 5 or under in the natural population, but it's something like over 10 or even 20% of people who are in inpatient. Anyway, the point is these rates are very, very low in the natural environment. The average time that your wife says to you something, it's not a test. It's not a test. If it's a test, it's just so that you say you love her more. That's like a preoccupied attachment thing, which is way high rates. That's like 20 or 25% of people have preoccupied attachment. Refer back to the attachment style podcast. So people that are always reassurance seeking of either gender, it's not a shit test. Nobody is trying to like make sure you're strong enough to put them in their place. This is not like a real thing. It sounds like something out of like maybe like porn, like BDSM porn, like what a sub would do. Like this is like the brat culture with like BDSM. This is not what your average wife is doing. So if your average wife says, do I look fat in this dress? What she is saying has nothing to do with the man. This is like why it's so like strange and self-absorbed for men to think that this is happening. And I'll talk about what this relates to in a second. But she's insecure about herself. Her body. She's worried about her. She feels bad about herself. Your job is to say, no, sweetheart, you look beautiful, but I like this other dress better, if she really is going to embarrass herself somehow that she doesn't fit into it. But generally, your job is just to be sweet and loving and reassuring. That is what an emotionally healthy, non-borderline woman wants you to do. It's no test. Like, the people who think that women are like shit testing them are also the people that grew up in houses that I talk about always with my bank idea. That's like my favorite one to talk about, growing up in like a paranoid, negative house with the parent who comes home. They're like, I went to the bank. I'll tell you what happened. First, I asked if they had cash, if they had change for a 20, and they said no. And I said, the scrappy, the underdog rises again. I said, well, take me to your manager. And then the manager said, so like a person who's like always going out in the world and engaging in totally normative interactions, but somehow thinks that everyone is out to get them all the time, they raise men who are then very susceptible to the idea of the shit test, because it goes along with how they view the world in general, which is people are out to get them and trap them. So men who have trouble trusting, men who grew up in very difficult homes and places where they did not feel secure and safe, they believe in shit tests. Of course, it goes exactly along with what you would believe, that everyone in the world is out to get you. So it makes sense. Women would be out to get you too. Another one they say is like a woman that's like, so you're in a bar, let's say, and the woman, this example is given to me by a male, who says that the woman would be like, I don't date bald guys, and you're a bald guy. So this isn't a shit test. This is not a shit test. Respect what she's saying and say, oh, all right. Not too nice for you to say, quite honestly, but I'll leave. No problem. That's what a man with self-esteem does. They don't say, oh yeah, well, I don't date, like, and then come up with some sort of like retort that they learned online that somehow is going to get past the woman's defenses. She doesn't have defenses. She's a bitch. Like, you don't say that to people. So a healthy man would know, don't get involved with somebody who starts out by insulting me. That's not a shit test. If you somehow end up sleeping with that woman and or marrying her, you failed the common sense test. The common sense test is if a woman insults you in one of your initial encounters, don't engage with them. Don't engage with them at all. If your wife continues to somehow insult you during your marriage, say we immediately have to go into couples counseling. I don't want this dynamic. You're not being very nice. I don't want to be with somebody who's unkind. You're unkind. That was an unkind thing to say. So there's not like shit tests that are going on by healthy women in order to see if men are masculine enough. So this isn't happening. So if a woman is saying something to you that's rude, call her out on being rude if you happen to already be married to her. If you're not married to her, use that as data about her personality and instead involve yourself with somebody who isn't rude to you. Now, if you are super defensive and preoccupied, which are a lot of the people, that are looking for advice on the internet about how to relate to women, quite honestly, they're preoccupied attachment. Refer back to my preoccupied attachment husband. So if you're a guy who thinks that his wife is, quote, shit testing him and she's really just like joking, like she's like joking around, like another example is, oh, hey, are you texting your girlfriend? Like that's like a cute joke. Like, that's like a joke. Unless she's looking at you, she's got a glint in her eye, and she's got a knife in her hand, and she's like, are you texting your girlfriend, you motherfucker? This is a borderline personality situation, unless, of course, you are texting your girlfriend, in which case, yeah, she's got a leg to stand on. But in a real situation where a woman's like, oh, who are you texting, all your girlfriends? What she's basically trying to do is say, I think you are handsome and I think you are sexy and I'm flirting with you, telling you that I think that other women would be attracted to you. If a man thinks this is like a shit test, then there's something wrong going on. That's joking around. If you're so defensive that you can't take a joke, like a joke that you could know, because if you are in this situation, I've already told you to go to a therapist, right? So you should say to your therapist, you should say, oh, my wife said to me, well, that's a bright shirt that you're wearing, because it was a red shirt and I usually wear a brown shirt. And I thought it was a shit test. So what I did is I remembered the things that I was learned and I said this other, negative sort of thing back, or I did. Like, maybe your wife was just like, oh, haha, like, look, you're wearing something different. Really nothing to say here in marriage, our small talk is limited. Let's just bring up the shirt for a second. Literally nothing going on except trying to have a fucking conversation. Then, that's probably what's going on. So this whole idea that women are, like, testing men is just as crazy to the 90% of women, if not more, as it is for men when they listen to women say really anti-male stuff, which is, you're correct, way common and should not be. And I call it out when I hear it, But another one would be for women that say that the man is like totally helpless. Oh, he can't even make a sandwich. He wouldn't even know where his socks were if I didn't tell him. The average man listening to that is like, what are you fucking kidding me? I make the fucking sandwich for the kids, like, all the time when you're not here, when you're out doing whatever, if you're working late, or like, what are you even talking about, man? So that is how the same anti-female thing comes out with the shit test idea as comes out with the men are lazy, men are incompetent, men are dogs. That's another one. Like all men are assholes. Who's going around saying all men are assholes? Women that were raised in dysfunctional homes where they learned that all men are assholes. Because all men aren't assholes and all women are not manipulative. Nor are the majority of women manipulative. There are personality disorders that lead to people acting manipulative of both genders. So as I said, like narcissistic males, and there can be borderline males and narcissistic women, obviously, as well. But men, and these are the cluster B personality disorders, the more dramatic ones. Another one is histrionic personality, if you want to look that up. We don't have time to discuss that one. It just means being pretty fucking histrionic. But the point is, people with personality disorders test their partners constantly. The narcissist tests to make sure that the person is obsequious enough and worshipful enough, and the borderline tests to see if they can push away the person because they're so scared that the person will leave them. Because it's a disorder predicated on fear of abandonment because they've been abandoned so much as a kid, emotionally or physically. And so they push away the partner, and they're the one who will be like, oh, what are you wearing that ugly red shirt for? Yeah, that's a shit test, but it's not a shit test. It's basically the response to that shit test. If your wife has borderline personality, go back to my podcast and see. And she says, what are you fucking wearing that ugly red shirt for? That's not a shit test. That's called, I am telling you with my words that I am a deeply troubled, mentally ill person. And I am basically begging you to get me into some kind of counseling immediately because our children are listening to me be my worst self at all times due to my complete absence of any self-worth, which was hammered into me tragically in my own girlhood. That is what she's saying to you. It's not a shit test, okay? So if you see somebody that's, quote, shit testing you in a bar, there are plenty of lovely women that will not say anything insulting about you at all and will not make you jump through any hoops at all. And the few hoops that you may in your anxious mind think that they're making you jump through, if you look at it through the lens that I'm teaching you right now, may just be joking around, because they actually think that you have some self-esteem. So they're like joking around a little bit like, oh, you must really be a big Mets fan. Like there's men that are so sensitive out there in the world. They're wearing like a Mets jersey and a Mets hat. And the woman's like, oh, seems like somebody's a really big Mets fan. And they're thinking, what does she mean by that? Was this some kind of shit test? And it's like, no, wake up. Like this is playful humor. So you could tell the difference between playful humor and somebody who hates you or is insulting you. In the latter, either don't get into the relationship or get the hell into counseling, the same as you would if your wife says to you, what are you looking so ugly for today, in any sort of sense. Do not classify that as a shit test. Classify that as a cry for help. Same as if she lit a match and dropped it in the middle of your kitchen. You wouldn't be like, oh, I don't know if we need couples counseling or if I just need to hold a stronger frame. You would be like, bitch is crazy. I am getting her out of this house where my kids are. That is the way that you need to respond when somebody insults you, in front of your children. Okay? Or even not in front of your children. Don't get into these situations. They are far less common than people would have you think in internet rabbit holes. Okay? And if you have questions on what specifically a shit test is and isn't, then you can write out a little play for me to act, or even better, a voicemail about like something that a woman would say that in fact is a shit test. But let me tell you, if you go back with a different lens and you're like, wait, was I raised to be really fucking paranoid? Was I raised to think women are manipulative bitches by my family of origin, where I saw like basically a cold mother and like a passive father, and then I resolved never to be like this, which is like 99% of the guys listening to this that this resonates with. Like, if I looked at this different, would I see that women are actually just out there in the universe trying to find love the same as men are? Yes. Are they people? Yes. Do they sometimes joke around? Yes. If they say something really horrible, should I assume that that is them testing me, or that is about them and their core, deep self-worth issues? The latter. All right. So hopefully this cleared something up for somebody, or at least sparked a little bit of curiosity into this concept, such that you don't misclassify things in a way that stops you from perceiving when situations are actually very bad for you to get into, and overthinking that certain throwaway lines and or flirtation literally is some sort of test to which you would do anything but laugh and say, ha ha. Literally, that would be the response, to like the Mets t-shirt. Yeah, I really do. I love the Mets. Like, that's it, you don't have to wham, say something back that's going to show that you're like some strong guy. Like, that isn't what's required. That isn't what is happening. All right. So, yes, please do subscribe. Follow me on TikTok. Follow me on YouTube. Follow me everywhere. And I'll talk to y'all soon.